A new animated movie by Illumination studio called Migration is coming out, or came out already depending on when you watch this video. This movie just reminded me why I dislike everything, or at least most of what Illumination puts out so much. Let me start with how I see the movie industry, or any industry that creates content and entertainment. There are two main aspects that exist: art, the creative drive, and business, the money. And there has to be a very healthy relationship between them, like a healthy marriage between two spouses. A great product, whether it's a great movie, TV show, or a great video game, is always a healthy child of art and business. You cannot have a good movie without genuine passion and creativity. And at the same time, you cannot have a mass product that people will watch without money. What Illumination creates is absolutely not about any creativity or artistic drive. What Illumination does is business in its purest unfiltered form. Let's take a look at the studio's filmography. The first feature movie Illumination released was Despicable Me. Not the most original premise, not the most promising film overall, but with a very modest budget, modest in comparison to other big animation companies. Illumination's debut grossed over $500 million, almost as much as Disney's Tangled, which cost 4 times more money. Illumination adapted The Lorax, a famous children's novel by one of the most well-known American children's authors of the last century, into a movie starring Danny DeVito and the most promising pop star at that time, Taylor Swift. The Lorax was a mild success, making much less than the studio expected. So, the next movie was Despicable Me 2, and that movie became an absolutely phenomenal success, grossing almost $1 billion. So after that, Illumination decided to double down on the franchise. The company noticed that people liked Minions, so we got a spin-off movie about them. Then we received a prequel to Despicable Me, a sequel to Minions of course, and Despicable Me 4 is coming out in 2024. Other projects by Illumination were also all just safe bets. People like cute talking animals? Let's make The Secret Life of Pets. Disney is successful again. They are developing a movie about anthropomorphic animals living in a modern megapolis. So, let's make our own movie about anthropomorphic animals, which will be released the same year as Disney's movie. If Disney's movie is a success, people might wanna watch our movie too. We'll also invite a bunch of currently popular celebrities, instead of actual voice actors. You know, marketing. And if our movies are successful enough, we'll just quickly craft sequels. There is absolutely zero creative thought behind any Illumination movie. These stories are like generic pop music that you hear on the radio. They were crafted not by artists, but by rich people in suits sitting in cabinets somewhere in Los Angeles. They are a petulant mix of everything a regular person might enjoy. Cute animals, recognizable pop tunes, recognizable names, humor to appeal to both little kids and their parents, but mostly to kids. Very generic stories that don't challenge your imagination in any way. These movies might feel enjoyable enough, that's why they gross so much after all. I personally really enjoyed Sing 2, even though the movie is extremely cheesy and basically the repetition of the first Sing, but with a cute she-wolf. At the end of the day, Illumination brings absolutely nothing to conversation. Animation is a very elaborate art form that inspires millions of people every single day. Animation inspires people to write their own stories, to learn how to draw, how to animate. Animation helps people to cope with problems, with identity and self-acceptance. Animation is culture, but Illumination movies do not enrich this culture of animation in any way. In fact, what they do, they just parasite on it. I had been thinking about a word to describe what Illumination movies are doing to animation, and this is the word I came up with eventually. Bastardize. Illumination bastardized animation. Illumination movies exist with the sole purpose to shake your wallet. Illumination is like YouTube Kids but in cinematic format. If there is Illumination, an embodiment of business over art, there must be an antipode, and this antipode is Pixar. Pixar is an example of a very healthy marriage between art and business. Pixar movies have been pushing the limits of storytelling for decades. Pixar as a studio always valued creativity above everything else. Pixar's philosophy is simple. Don't be afraid of failing. Always create a story that you as an artist wanna tell, even if it feels like nobody's gonna watch it. We got a story about a French rat who wanted to become a chef at a restaurant. We got a story about two robots that don't even talk and can only pronounce their names. Illumination would have said that it's nuts to make a story of robots that don't talk. The movie that is not a comedy and doesn't have cute characters to sell us toys. But Pixar said, do it. And we got WALL-E, one of the best animated movies, period. Next year after WALL-E we got Up, a story of a bitter old man in his 70s who lost his wife but wants to go on a journey to South America by attaching his house to the balloons. The opening sequence of Up in itself is art. It's a tragic story within another tragic story. Watching Ratatouille, WALL-E and Up, you feel like these are the stories that someone genuinely wanted to tell. Modern Pixar is no different. Let's take Turning Red and Elemental. Both movies are very personal stories. Turning Red was written and directed by Domi Shi, a Chinese-Canadian filmmaker who shared her emotions, feelings, and anxieties as a Chinese-Canadian girl growing up in Canada, her problems with her family, her heritage, and her identity. Elemental was directed by Peter Sun, a Korean-American whose family immigrated to New York City in the 1970s. What we saw in Elemental was Sun's personal experience. What he saw at home and what he saw outside, at school, were two different worlds that collided. Sun reflects on prejudice and racism that he had to encounter because of his ethnicity. He reflects on his conflicts with his traditional family. Turning Red and Elemental wouldn't have existed if she and Sun genuinely didn't want to share their stories. This is art, and this is what makes Pixar and Illumination feel so different. You won't have such sincere stories from Illumination. Let's talk about Walt Disney Animation Studios too, specifically about their revival era cartoons. The stories might not be as elegant as Pixar's, but they too have a lot to bring to the table. Frozen and Moana deconstruct classical Disney tropes, especially Frozen. Frozen movies show that you can be happy by yourself if you find peace with yourself. Disney movies of the past decade give voices to the groups of people who didn't really have a voice previously. Encanto beautifully represents Colombian culture. A lot of Latino kids and adults, both in and outside the US, have felt seen. They grew up watching Ariel, Belle, and Cinderella, and now they finally see themselves. Raya and the Last Dragon represents Southeast Asian cultures, and Moana does the same with Polynesian culture. Seeing someone like you on screen can make people really happy. This is why representation is so important. This is why Encanto became a huge cultural phenomenon in the United States, the country where 18% of the population are Hispanic or Latino. For a very long time, these dozens of millions of people did not have a real voice in the media of their own country. But Disney movies changed this. Encanto shows a mixed race family, different body types, the main protagonist who wears glasses. I don't think Encanto is a great movie story-wise, but it is an important cornerstone that will be remembered. This is art. Strange World finally gave us a gay main character, not just an ally, and it was important for many LGBTQ+ people out there who were still questioning their validity. This is the power that art has that can change and shape the world we live in. And then we have Illumination movies which represent nothing at all. Let's compare two similar movies from Disney and from Illumination, Zootopia and Sing. In Zootopia, the city where the animals live is carefully crafted, with a lot of thought put into world building. Every kind of mammals have a place to live which suits them most. Polar bears live in very cold tundra town, because they can't live in warm places. Small critters live in little rodentia, where everything is small and designed specifically for them. In Sing, however, the city where the story takes place is just a generic big megapolis, but with animals instead of humans. Replace animals with humans in Zootopia, everything will change. Replace animals with humans in Sing, nothing will change whatsoever. Disney movies also push the technology forward. I saw a documentary by Insider about Frozen 2 and was honestly flabbergasted. The amount of work that software engineers and animators put into their movie is absolutely insane. Disney animators went on long trips to Finland and Iceland to learn about Nordic nature, how wind works, how sand interacts with water, how ice interacts with water to make every single detail look physically realistic. Frozen 2 is perhaps the most mediocre Disney revival ever movie, but it is a technological mirror, which pushed 3D animation to its limit. Frozen 2 will not be studied in screenwriting classes, but it will be studied in animation classes as one of the most important points of 3D animation alongside other Disney movies, like Tangled, Moana or Strange World. What was perceived as almost impossible when Tangled was released in 2010 is very much possible now due to truly miraculous technological progress. And then we have Illumination. No technological innovation at all. Their animation doesn't cost much and looks accordingly. Another great example of art and business being in a healthy relationship is movies by Hayao Miyazaki. Watching pretty much every movie directed and written by Miyazaki, you know that this is the idea that he came up with while eating at the restaurant, or showering, or reading. Every story is a sincere product of Miyazaki's imagination. He would never tell a story if he didn't feel like he wanted the story to be told. As a result, we got some of the most beautiful movies that have ever been created. Movies full of creativity and originality, and amazing inspiring characters who defy social norms and social expectations. This is what art should be. This is what Makoto Shinkai is doing now, albeit to a lesser extent than Miyazaki. Illumination is definitely a bastardization of the art of animation. But if we talk broader, not just animation, but cinema in general, the majority of blockbusters became exactly this. When I see a trailer for a new Fast and Furious movie, or for the next Kong vs Godzilla movie, I immediately think of what value do these movies even have? How will they be remembered in the future? James Cameron's Avatar movies will be remembered for how they revolutionized VFX and CGI. Watching The Way of Water in IMAX theater literally blew my mind to pieces. The story was very mediocre, very basic, but the visual side was fantastic. Cameron took his time so that the VFX team could polish every single aspect, every single frame, and tiniest detail so that it would look perfect. And no one even thought of rushing the production. The gap between Avatar movies was 13 years, and the sequel became the third highest grossing movie of all time. Another great sci-fi movie released in recent years was Denis Villeneuve's Dune. The movie is a carefully crafted adaptation with a lot of creative vision. And the sound design is fabulous. Try to watch Dune Part 2 in IMAX format in March, and you'll be blown by amazing work with sound. The Batman is a great movie. Joker, Logan, Villeneuve's other projects. Kong vs Godzilla is just pure meaningless and extremely dull masturbation at this point. DCU and recently MCU movies feel exactly the same way. Disney has been perhaps the biggest contributor to the bastardization of art. Not the Walt Disney Animation Studios, but the Disney company. Disney's approach is to create as much content as possible and to make as much money as possible. Money is the top priority. 2019 was a pivotal year as Disney had not one, not two, but $7 billion movies. 8 if we count Spider-Man Far From Home, which technically belongs to Sony. The only billion-dollar movie not affiliated with Disney was Joker. That year showed Disney that people would watch practically anything with any kind of recognizability, be it Marvel movies or remakes of classical cartoons. But Disney company, driven by money, was extremely short-sighted and missed the moment when an extreme form of fatigue hit the general audiences. People got tired of uninspiring, generic and safe stuff. 2023 is a year when almost all big franchise movies collapsed at the box office. And the movies that have been thriving are creative art. Barbie, Oppenheimer, recent Japanese movies The Boy and the Heron and Godzilla -1. Now even something presumably safe like Illumination movies is not safe anymore, as Migration is heading towards the lowest opening weekend in Illumination history. If you are watching this video weeks or months after Migration released, and the movie slayed the box office, the last sentence might sound quite bizarre, but as I'm writing my script it seems like Migration will have a disappointing theatrical run. You can find examples of art and art bastardization within the same franchise in a span of just several months. Obi-Wan was a poorly written, poorly acted and poorly filmed show, an ultimate disappointment. But Andor, released just a few months later, was one of the best shows of the year, if not the best. The insane attention to details, the fantastic work with sound. The world of Andor feels real, it feels tangible. For the first time in Star Wars history, we truly realize why the Empire is so evil. We see how this giant fascist machine works from the inside. It's not just General Hux shouting a menacing speech from a high tribune. We see how the Empire actually hurts people, how people get thrown into jail for some made-up crimes like anti-imperial behavior. We see how people get exploited to the bone by the Imperial prison system, which uses prisoners as cheap workforce, basically legalized slavery. Andor works really well with a subjective perspective, and because of that we feel everything from the character's perspective. When rebels hide from an Imperial fighter which flies over them like a terrifying monster from a horror movie, it makes us despise the Empire much more effectively than Starkiller destroying whole planets makes us hate the First Order in The Force Awakens. Very different levels of quality. There is always hope that creative art will prevail eventually, because the best stories are always born out of creativity. Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Hayao Miyazaki, people will always remember the scene from Empire Strikes Back when Luke finds out that Darth Vader is his father. But who will remember that Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter in 40 years? Businesses go bankrupt, but art always lives. Hey, thanks for watching this video essay. Recently I've created my first big artistically ambitious project, which is a documentary about the history of Walt Disney Animation Studios. How Disney Brothers started their studio first, how Disney lost the animators due to strike and World War, how the studio almost ceased to exist at some point and how it was reborn. If you wanna support my channel, please take a look at my documentary.